It's always in the news. Cybercriminals attacking great organizations, wreaking havoc on the trust of their brand.
We socialize cybersecurity for you to raise awareness.
Interviewing leaders who built and protect great brands.
We help talented people enter into this incredible field, and we share our research at blockbuster true cybercrime stories.
This is Cybercrime Junkies. And now the show.
Well, all right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Morrow. In the studio today is my always positive, fancy-free side, Mark Mosher. It's on my insincere things to say to coworkers app that I've developed. Mark, it's in all the stores. And yeah, very excited about today's episode. So today we are joined by Richard Hollis, one of the leaders at Risk Crew, a great methodology and framework about why so many organizations are struggling with cybersecurity and really why so many efforts have failed. And then he's got some best practices to share, some ideas and insight. Mr. Hollis, thank you. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
Well, we are excited to have you here. So, great. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Kind of, did you grow up in the London area? Are you from England originally? Tell us about your history.
Sure. I'll give you the long story. Okay. I still haven't sold the rights to. So we've got to
okay, good to know.
No, I'm an American. I'm actually from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I grew up in Milwaukee, and the military took me overseas. I ended up back in Washington, D.C., where I started my career, by and large government, because I got out of the military with a clearance, and so that's what you do. And I went to school in D.C., worked for the government, and did that for about 10 or 15 years till I got. Oh, it's great, actually. You work for the government when you're young. You can have a lot of responsibility in terms of budgets and things, yeah. and I was actually the deputy director on the Moscow Embassy reconstruction project. I don't know if you remember that when the old U.S. Embassy was
built. I do remember that.
We're rebuilding it. Yeah, I was on that. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But then I got recruited by, I think it was Philips and Lucent did a joint venture and took me to Paris to be the security director for their cell phones, which was at the time, it was, I think, late 90s, 98, 99.
Yep.
Cell phones were like the sexy technology. So I got out of what was at the time, but computer security at the time was Wang desktops and Tempest. That was everybody's idea of.
Those were the days of Y2K.
No, really, exactly.
That was the thing.
The biggest problem is Y2K, and that was when people were actually engaging security consultancies to help them sort out Y2K. But long story short, I left Paris and started the business. I'm one of the founders and directors here at a company called Risk Crew. We started the business in London, and it's a product agnostic consultancy. Not that big. We're under 30, 35 people, I think we are. But we do we were early founders of OWASP out here. It's a product agnostic consultancy, so everything from threat assessments, to pen testing to business continuity. But it's all 101, practicing the fundamentals. We preach the gospel according to it's a process. It's not a product. So we fall.
You're taking away my sting. That was one of my questions later.
Was it really?
Okay. I have a whole thing about it being a process and not a product.
Take that out in editing, can't you? No, it's what drives me though, David. And this is part of, that's how I view the thing. I'm a 101, I'm a fundamentals guy. And so, and that's the gospel I preach, and it's found its way into the consultancy. So, it's not about the firewall. It's about the configuration. It's about, the process behind anything. And so that drove the ethic of the company. That's it. We're having a lot of fun doing things, everything from, like I said, supply chain risk assessments to red team testing. And the European market is very different, I think, as an American working over here than
we were just, We were just having this conversation. Do you mind if let's jump off right there?
Yeah, that's a great.
What is the deal with America? Like, I cannot, I don't have this. I was just talking on another episode with somebody, and they're like, well, we do a lot over in Europe, and we have all the, I'm from the northern part of Chicago, by the way, just south of Milwaukee, spent my summers up there. Very familiar with the area that you grew up in, by the way. Just talking with somebody that does a lot of consultancy over in the UK, and they were saying with GDPR and everything, they have such a different view of privacy, of personal data. They believe it is a fundamental human right. And in America, we're like, I don't care, accept all cookies. Here's everything, my passwords, my dog's name, we don't seem to care as a culture. And I'm shocked by it.
I don't get it either. Honestly, it's easier for me to do business here because when I look back at the American culture, I kind of have to fight that. But here, it's not a sell. Here people actually read terms and conditions of Amazon before they sign up.
Right.
Here, it really seems to be understood that privacy is a right. It's not to be given away. And Europeans in general, the Brits are behind the Europeans because they're very Americanized in the way they do e-commerce.
Oh, that's a good point.
So data is cash more so to the Brits than the Europeans, but Europeans don't see, they see data as data that belongs to me, not data that belongs to you because I visited your website. So GDPR is just one of many types of legislation that are very pro end user that we just don't see in the States. And it's disappointing to me because I believe in that I'm personally a paranoid schizophrenic, and I don't like people to know what shoe size, much less what, the conditioner I use in my hair. And Europeans are very much like that. They're very privacy oriented. That's mine. That's not yours. And so it's a different approach to technology in terms of the protection of data.
Well, it's really come to the head too recently in America when other things get debated, like whether to ban TikTok or not, or things like that, and people are jumping up and down about that. And it's like, well, we have no standards, like we have no codes, we have different frameworks that are ideas, basically, like unless they have no regulatory enforcement power behind them, so they're just kind of lists of best practices out there. And unless you're in a particular vertical or field like HIPAA or CMMC, things like that, but it's really a struggle here. I mean, we part of, I think that's a good point, because some of the clients that we deal with are overseas. We're here in America. We don't have to sell them on the need for security consulting, security services. It's just us offering our best, and then we compete against others, right? For some that are very more geocentric here in the US, we first have to convince them that they even need security services at all. Right? Because their view is, well, I haven't had them for the last 20 years. Why do I need to have this expense now? I'm like, how can you not? Right? Like, it is, when we get online, we're in their world. It's a global world once we get online, and it's quite interesting. So let me ask you this: when you talk about, you have the circle of failure, and you have this phenomenal kind of framework that you've built. I'm going to put it up on the screen for the viewers. You talk about the circle of failure in cybersecurity: buy more products, fail to define strategy, implement product to secure systems, neglect people and process. It's so true. Products do not work, systems are breached, and then we go back to buying more products, failing to define strategy, and the circle continues. I really want to first, what caused you to develop the theory?
Do you know that old guy, the old man in your neighborhood, when your ball went into his yard? I have to ask him.
Oh yeah.
I think my age actually, David, Mark, I've been doing this for my whole career. It's 30 some
Right.
years. And, you get to an age where you put your life into work. And I literally started before cybersecurity had a name when, back when Y2K was and spam was the big deal. And so we've had, the way I look at it, this idea, this attitude is this headspace is by and large came from my age and my position, looking back on as older people do and thinking, what have I done in my career? And you start to look for things. Have I made a difference? Am I part of something that has made a difference? Have I changed the future in my career? And I struggle for that. And everybody thinks cybersecurity is so sexy, but when I look at it, the industry itself, I see more failure that confronts me than successes after 30 years of practice. Wow. So it is. So a couple of years ago, I started that used to weigh on my shoulders, and I thought, no, there's got to be some wins out here. But every day I pick up the paper, and there's Yahoo 3 billion breached, 3 billion. Right. Facebook, right. 500 million, Adhar, 1 billion here, 1 billion there, and I'm thinking the breaches alone will make you pull your covers over your head and not go to work. and the rise of regulation, for me, we talked about regulation out here in the EU, but regulation in general for me is a sure sign that the industry itself doesn't work. Like aviation,
right. because they need parenting. Right.
They have to step in, and somebody else says, wait a minute, we need seat belts in these cars because people are going through the windshield at 20 miles an hour. And that's, but it takes 20 years, and it takes suddenly some regulation steps in, and then, Detroit starts spending $1 for another piece of canvas, and, and suddenly we have safety and then airbags and then shatterproof glass. And anyway, this hasn't happened in our industry. I don't see. And so so when regulation steps in and you see regulation like GDPR or HIPAA, for me, that's a sign that the industry has failed to police itself, to look after itself, right? So there's regulation, there's the breaches, and I just couldn't see a lot of wins. And I started to look at things and look at what are the, and I told you I am a process, let me back up and say I'm a computer security oxymoron. All right. For me, that's what my tattoo says. Computer security oxymoron.
Yours too?
We got them at the same place. Exactly.
Mark's has that on one arm, on the other
I've
arm.
got Lockbit
3.0.
Is it? I should have considered. But that's the way I look at my profession. So I thought, okay, so computer security oxymoron. So the game is identify, minimize, and manage. That's a process, and that's why we start out saying security is a process. It's not a product. It's a process of continually managing the risk of. All right, but if the objective of the cybersecurity industry was to prevent a breach and prevent data theft, clearly you look around, and I challenge you to find some sort of evidence of a success. And this is what I do for a living. This is my profession. So after a while, I thought, okay, let me look at the evidence of the failure. And it was there in at least 5 areas that I started to talk about as I put together this circle and figure out why do we continually fail, and then fail again, and then fail the next year. And the first thing I saw is with our products, our cybersecurity products. I thought I don't know about you guys, but I go to at least 30, 40 events, cybersecurity events every year. And we don't talk about the fact that our products, they just don't work. They just don't work. And
when you go to the events, they have a lot of the marketing has unrealistic claims.
Well, you've got vendors out there stating things like solving the human factor, No, you didn't.
Right.
Exactly. But, and of course, the events are sponsored by that. The events are sponsored by that.
Exactly.
So there's not a lot of people who are going to go up on stage and say, hey, I think one of the problems in this industry is our products don't work. Our vendors don't give us products that work. All right. They're always a step behind the threats. They were good for threats 2 or 3 years ago. But they're, it's like they sell us knives to take the gunfights, I say, because we show up completely unprepared to meet the challenges on the threat landscape today. And I say that, and I understand vendors need to make money. I do, but I think we don't speak enough that our products that we rely on in our industry aren't fit for purpose. They're just not up to the challenge of the threat landscape and the threat actors today. They don't meet the capability, the adaptability. They don't change fast enough. And we're locked into something that worked 2, 3, 5 years ago. And, we're still using it and calling it cutting edge. That bothers me.
Yeah. So what about, let me unpack this a little. Let me play devil's advocate. You talked about the lack of success. Here's the dilemma, I think, is to the degree that any service, and I don't think it's a product, I think it comes from a service of people really fighting and working together, building a security culture, things like that. When they succeed in blocking certain threats or minimizing things and stopping something from happening, it's never going to be in the news. And so we're never going to really hear about it necessarily, are we?
No.
So that's like, what do we say to what do we say to that? Because I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm saying, what do we say to the people that bring that up?
For me, that's what the fight is. The fight is to stay out of the news. So the less we're in the news, the more successful we should be. So it's that inverse thinking that, we look at the breaches and we look at the breaches every day that face us in the news. And I'm saying that's evidence of our failure. But the opposite of this is the good fight. When we do have wins, when we do stop threats, that's our job. What do we want to take a victory lap and tell everybody about it?
Right.
Congratulations, you did what you're supposed to.
Exactly. Right. There you go, Mark. That's exactly what I mean. That and it's not that way. In fact, when you think about it, one of the first things I realized, and when I said it out loud, people said, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Do you know that cybersecurity vendors profit from the insecurity of computing?"
Correct.
Now, I know that sounds stupid, but when you say it out loud like that and say, wait a minute, these are vendors who sell us something because something's not right. And if it were right, they wouldn't make a profit. And for me, it's a little like the pharmaceutical industry, I grew up for years and they make a lot of money selling things that treat the symptoms. Here's a cough syrup for that cough, but they treat the flus, the viruses, the symptoms, and they make a lot of money. So if there was a cure for the common cold, and
money goes away.
The money goes away. And I'm not, and then I start to get really cynical. And I look at every vendor saying, if there wasn't, here's another sign. After every single breach, look at the top 10 guys in the industry and look at their profits increase. After WannaCry, after, share value increases, so big anyway for ransomware, security vendors have made a lot of money out of this latest ransomware wave. Why? Because that's part of the circle. Buy more product because we all rush. But why is it that security vendors profit from a breach instead of from preventing one, as you just said, David? And that should be the norm. And yet the reality is the market is the inverse. The market rewards security vendors after a breach, because we all run out and we're scared and we buy stuff because our hair's on fire, and we buy that next gadget which doesn't work, and then we get re-breached and we all wig out and go buy the next thing which doesn't work because our threat vendors are well down the line. And something that came out of RSA's R&D lab, they've been working on for 5 years, that's already OBE by a new threat.
Right.
But they're going to sell it to us anyway because they've got an investment in it.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
So
how about plain and clear language from vendors, right? Because part of the reason, to me, at least in my experience, part of the reason the breach occurred is the clients didn't have certain services and systems in place in the first place, right? They didn't have anomaly detection, threat hunting in the first place. So when they were in, they had a dwell time of 9 months because you didn't even have the basics involved, right? So long as the layers of security are presented to an organization as a needed layer, whether it's from them or from another vendor, whatever, at least there's some best practices that are improved. But some of it rests on the organizations themselves and not wanting to spend the money on risk risk is kind of a dial, right? And some organizations don't want to turn that dial at all, and some will turn it up halfway so it doesn't get in. Pure security, the dial's all the way up, and you can't operate. But when they hit that middle ground, it seems to keep them mostly out of the news. What role is the role of education for the organizations play? I guess that's what I'm getting at.
I think it starts with, and one of the cogs on my wheel is we failed to define a strategy.
Yes.
I have rarely met a CISO who could define their online strategy in one sentence. And it's just they're just not that focused, and because they can't articulate a strategy, and then the next step is to calculate the return on your investment for everything you buy. We've had 30 years and we can't calculate RSOI on any product, much less service or security awareness program. And so security becomes this technology problem. It goes to the IT department. They see it as a technology problem, as I point out. Then they neglect the other two threat vectors, because we all got together and we said, wait a minute, this is about protecting people, process, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't define a strategy that's going to cover those three attack vectors, then what you end up doing and you cannot articulate the return on investing in protecting attack vector 1, attack vector 2, attack vector 3. Then you just start listening to vendors saying, "Be afraid, be very afraid, buy this product, or you're going to have ransom. You're going to have."
Then they just keep driving FUD, right? The fear, uncertainty.
That's it.
Exactly
So it's our failure, guys. That's what I think. It's our failure.
I would agree with that.
Find a strategy and
Absolutely.
measure, put KPIs and measure RSOI against anything we buy and anything. And that way we can speak to the business in the terms. But I don't know about you guys, but 30 years, I don't see a CISO who can articulate, in a powerful way.
Yeah.
I just know. And this is what I do for a living.
Yeah. And there's great sophistication in that simplicity, right? If they can clearly articulate in one or two sentences what their strategy is, then that's impactful. If it has to come in a 500-page document, then there's no thought behind it. It's just reiterating of data and nice graphs. And they need to be able to sit across the table and kind of explain it.
Can I tell you a story? It's a little off color, but
welcome to our podcast. We are born of this.
I'm working for a company that's been doing penetration testing for 20 years, and we were in business for about 10 years, and then suddenly we get an incoming call from an industry we've never worked in before, and we've worked for government and nuclear and they call it grid. Anyway, and suddenly we get a call from an online adult entertainment provider to do a pen test,
which is the hub of malware. Right.
Well, it is spyware, malware. I mean, these guys have a reputation, right? You go visit one of their sites, you're going to get inundated. So we get an incoming call. We think that's interesting, and this is about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was at the time was the number 2 online adult entertainment provider here in the UK. And so of course the pen test team's like, "Wahoo, we're testing a adult entertainment site." So it was supposed to be a 5-day project. You put in 5 days. The tester comes up, looks at me, says, "Rich, nothing. 0, not even a warning." Yeah, and of course, exactly. If you do pen testing, there's no such thing. And I said, put another 2 days into it. Are you sure you got the right IPs? Nope, comes back. We doubled the time. A 5-day project, we ended up putting 20 days in, and we found nothing, not 0, not even a warning. All right, we had 10 guys on it for almost 2 weeks. So I said, okay, print out the report for me. They're located offshore here in the Isle of Man. And so I get on a little flight. I sit down with the CISO in a conference room. I give him a pen test report. I said, I can't charge you for this. We've been in business 10 years, never done a pen test and not find one vulnerability, not one. And he goes, and he's looking over the report and he's saying, "Did you do this? Did you do that?" Yes, 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 yes. And he looks at me and he said, no, it looks like a good test. Thanks very much. And I said, wait a minute. What do you know that I don't know?
Yeah.
He said, well, I know that on the internet, you're either my client or my enemy. And
I love that phrase.
Exactly. I love that. I thought, I've been doing this for so long. I've never heard a CISO for a bank articulate a more effective strategy. You're either my client or my enemy on the internet. That's it. And if you're my enemy, meaning you want free product, I'll give you spyware. I'll give you, but you want to give me your credit card. Welcome to the inner sanctum. And then I started thinking, what do these guys sell? They sell privacy.
Right.
More so
Oh,
than
yeah.
you get
Yes.
it? And
Yeah, I just connected
I've
the
been doing
dots.
this exactly. And that's what it took me to. And I was in business 7 years before I connected the dots. And I
Yes.
thought, online adult entertainment providers protect my personal details better than my bank.
Yeah.
And I just
That's
thought
pretty
these
good.
guys get it, because what is your worst fear if you use one of these sites? That's your mother,
Exposure.
father, uncle, aunt, your dog finds out you're using it and thinks less of you. They know it's all about privacy. Now, not if you don't give them a credit card.
Right.
But and I went out and this was after California State Senate bill where all the listings of who's had a breach, and I looked for the last 20 years. Now you find in the last 5 years a couple these sites have had but they've lost passwords. Not one of them has lost a PCI a credit card or had a PCI infringement. And for me
That's true. Yeah.
that's an industry that gets it right. That
Wow.
because they understand. You use our services. You don't want people to. So they have a zero. My point is zero tolerance for breaches, and that's from the top down. And this is a business that makes a lot of money. Led the way for all of us to make money in e-commerce. And truly, one of the only industries that stand out that get security because
That is
it's
so
privacy.
interesting.
I know.
And he was able to articulate his strategy
One sentence.
in one sentence.
Yeah.
You're either my client or my enemy.
Yeah.
That's good.
And he's absolutely right. There's
That's
nobody
really
else
good.
looking out after you.
That is
And
so
could you
interesting.
imagine if your
And
bank
he
that
and
strategy?
he created the dichotomy, right?
Yep.
If you're not a paying client, then you're just a visitor and you can have all the spyware and malware. We don't care.
Binary condition. Yep. You
Right.
want
Yes.
free?
Binary condition.
Fine. You give me your credit card. That's seriously, and that's what he said. Welcome to the inner sanctum. We'll look after you. So they have let me just finish this. They have.
Oh no, this is great.
They find one thing, they will fire a developer and
Wow.
make him do the walk of shame. I mean, literally finally puts his stuff in the box and walks around. Why? Because he did not do a sysadmin and update a patch, or it is just zero tolerance.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, what were they doing? What were their processes? That because they could have been using the same products that another organization that's been breached was doing,
Right.
but they weren't managing it right. They didn't have the processes behind it.
They have a reputation for embracing technology. So they were in virtualized platforms and cloud computing and cloud platforms before any of us were doing it. And they understood it. But the key was good sysadmin and
Really?
and secure by design. They actually take the time to develop the apps, with an SLC, do code reviews, do application, all the stuff that we preach that we should be doing. This is an industry that actually does it. Yep.
Well, now I feel
That
better
is
about using my
fantastic.
debit card on those sites.
Oh my god! Yeah, I was going to
I
say.
do.
I'm
I
sure
feel
Mark
much better
is-
now.
Mark is
Feel
a
much
card
better.
carrying client.
I'll join a
so
couple
that's
tonight.
great.
No, Mark, I've been using your card for years, and if you haven't felt anything,
That's what those charges were.
Wow. Well, and then we hear, and then was that, if you don't mind me asking, timeline, was that before or after that Ashley Madison breach?
Yeah, remember the fallout
Because
from
that was a
well, that was
huge
a
fallout.
that Ashley Madison breach was really interesting to me because that was a third party. These guys said use our site and for free. It's like remember the model was pay to enter, free to enter, pay to exit. It's free to join. But if you want to exit, you pay us like $5 Canadian or something, and we'll destroy your data. And everybody
I
thought,
didn't know that. I haven't
Wow.
used the site, so I didn't know. So that's how it worked. Oh wow.
That's how it worked. Free to enter, pay to exit. And on your exit, we'll delete your data, so it's like you never use the service. Okay, there's no such thing as a delete button in IT. And so the guys who
It's
attacked them
somewhere.
said, "Oh, really? I don't think you delete that," and went in and got it and made it public. And they did it just on, there was no theft of data other than making public data to embarrass the company because they lied. They were lying to their customers. They weren't deleting data. In fact, they were also selling it on, but there was no such thing as delete. So
that's what I was going to say. Are they
liked
getting with
that
data
breach.
brokers and then selling that data anyway for marketing purposes?
Exactly. So I like that breach just because it overturned their business model. They were they were lying to their customers saying, "Oh, we'll delete it. Don't worry about it." And I thought, and in the world of pen testing, that had a big sound. That was an ethical hack that we thought, man, they were just proving a point. Nobody made any money from
Maybe
that.
they just made a really good point.
Yeah, and I thought it was. And that is not adult entertainment. Remember, that was a
Right,
site that
correct.
was facilitating dating between
Totally
minors.
different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I was just curious because it's relatively similar,
Yeah.
similar type. But okay, oh, that's so interesting. So let me ask you, what does, in your role and in what you've seen, what benefit is there, or to what degree, in understanding the behavior and the people behind who's committing the cybercrime? Like studying cyber criminals, understanding what drives them, understanding the behavioral analytics. How does that play into what you see and what you guys do?
I have a very simplistic vision of the threat landscape, and it's been nurtured throughout the years. But in general, I think part of our misunderstanding is that we have failed to understand that data equals cash. Data equals cash. All data is valuable to somebody, some adversary. I don't care if it's, what shampoo you use, or, where you buy your clothes, what you like, what you don't like, all social media data. All data is intrinsically valuable to some threat actor. Okay. And I've seen databases, all kinds of databases being sold for all kinds of strange things. And I thought, that's unbelievable. A, that people kept a database of that specific thing, and B, that you could take that database and sell it on the internet, on the dark net. So first of all, I think a big misconception is, I think we don't, and by we I mean businesses don't see information assets as monetary things that can be monetized.
Right.
By adversaries. All right. So that's how I've always looked at things. When I go into a business and I say, what are you trying to protect? Why are you trying to protect it? And what's going to happen? And we start having this information about the value, the sensitivity of their assets, and who else that can be valuable to, to understand who might want to take that away from you. Whether you have a database of children's under 16's Facebook accounts or things, and you're a charity, or that you have a nuclear launch codes on your system. So if you understand what you have and who would want that and what benefit they could have from that, you understand the threat landscape, and specifically you start to single out who would take that away from you and who would have reason. But it starts with this simple premise that all data. Jeff Bezos taught us all that. Data equals cash, which, the books that we're going to buy, the places we've been, our geolocation, the billionaires, all these billionaires made that money off that simple premise. Data equals cash. And yet I rarely meet a business that understands that intuitively and looks at their information that they process, store, and transmit, and understands the monetary value to an attacker and protects it accordingly.
No, and I think that's the heart of it, isn't it? I mean, I think that is the key evolution step that especially we in America need to educate organizations, is because Mark and I come across business owners, executives at large organizations or business owners of small and mid-sized organizations all the time. They're like, I don't have a lot of data. I have 120 employees, but I don't have a lot of data. Like, what we do is kind of commoditize. We just make our money off of this. It's like, you have millions of dollars of data. There's so much right there just by having the employees. It's out, and they have customer lists, and they have, proposal documents, design documents. There's so much that can be monetized on the dark web.
And the other thing is, we fail this one. I think there's a conceptual. A, we don't understand data equals cash, and B, we think when it behooves us, we look at it at the problem as this is ones and zeros, and it's not people's lives. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is data about people's mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and children, and where they go to school and what blood type they are, and we it's like we disassociate with that ourselves of the database, and we just see it as ones and zeros, and it becomes a technology problem, and we never make it personal. One of the biggest reactions I get is when I walk into a boardroom and I say, okay, raise your hand if your personal data is in your business systems, where your children's go to school, pictures of your wife and you on vacation. Anybody have that kind of personal? And no, they don't do that. Business systems are one thing, but they don't understand our business systems are full of information about people and
Yep.
their personal lives and what they buy and where they go and where their kids go to school and that disassociation, even from people in our industry, guys. I talked to other cyber. I just about 2 weeks ago, I had a lunch with a guy who's the biggest firewall salesman out here in the UK, and he came in. He was really upset. I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Somebody broke into my laptop." And I went, "Oh, the irony!" A big laugh. But he was mad because someone took his pictures of vacation of he and his kids and his wife, and took it
There
off.
you go.
It's like now he's mad, and now it's personal. And I'm thinking, you sell firewalls for a living, and just now you're making
You just now came to that ephany, right?
exactly.
Well, I
Welcome to
think
the
I
party.
think being in cybersecurity, that obviously we understand it, and our threat hunters and the risk analysts and others on our teams need to understand the TTPs, of who they're up against. But I think it's our job, and this is, I'll look, and this is where I've struggled. I know. To get owners and executive leadership to really understand that mindset that your data is cash and that data comes from human lives, from people, and to get them to understand and have a clear vision of what the true threat landscape is and why that's important to them. And like David said, we just don't see it that often. And it's hard to convince people of that sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And that's the tool I use, is to try to make it personal and say, okay, if when they're determining how much security should we spend on protecting this database, and I would say, is your data in there? Like I said, as an example, what if this were your data? Whether it's buying data, what you did on the website, where your or geolocation data, where you were last week Thursday, because your customers expect, where's your personal expectations for the protection of that data? And shouldn't you start there when designing the security to protect that database, as if that data belonged to you and your family, and you would protect it accordingly? And that changes everything. Everybody goes,
Oh, that's
okay.
good. Yep.
Because they're disassociated from its customers, ones and zeros. And it's not, but if we put some skin in the game, if we had our own personal data at stake, I think we'd practice security by design.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
That's fantastic. One of my questions was, is security a product or a process? I think I know the answer.
It's a long. I got onto this. Well, yes, it is. It is absolutely a process, and I have to. Part of my struggle is I can't think of it. Product and services absolutely have a place, and I'm a service provider, but I know my place. I know my piece of the pie, what I can and can't do, where I'm effective and where I'm not, and where products are effective and where they're not. And at the end of the day, I've spent my 30 years in this career, and it is a process from the minute you get up to the minute you go to bed, and then you get up and you do it again. It is a cycle. Threats change, vulnerabilities change, threat landscapes change, technology changes. Change is the only constant in our industry. So it has to be a process because we thought if we locked into something, it's already past tense by the time it's effective. That security is a process, not a product, and change is the only constant in cybersecurity. Or is my other tattoo, Mark, if I could show that to you. But that's just a common sense approach. So, but when I engage with customers and we talk about problems, I say, are you ready for change? You ready for all that to be, past tense in a year from now?
Are you seeing organizations that have taken the time to create policies, right? An incident response plan, things like that. Are you seeing them actually implementing them or practicing them, like through tabletop exercises and things like that? Or are you seeing very few organizations?
Very few follow through on the process of a plan. Here, we got a plan.
Mhm.
It's business continuity plan. Well, I'm looking at the date. It's 7 years old.
Yeah, exactly. It's got dust on the
They gotta
shelf
blow
over
the
on the
dust off.
bookshelf, right?
Yeah, here it goes.
So if that's a typo, when's the last time it's been tested? No, that's part of the process. I mean, of even plans or processes, and you have to exercise that muscle to get it to be muscle memory. So when something happens, you just move by instinct and it all works. No, that's what I do for a living. And unfortunately, people don't, we have not become risk managers. We have become compliance managers. I am very much, and I know a customer immediately if he's a compliance box ticker or if he's actually in the game of waking up every day and having the landscape change. And
that's exactly right. Isn't that so true? Like from the first meeting, I can tell whether this person wants to check the box or whether this person cares and wants to just evolve the organization, get to the next level. We'll check the box along the way, but I want to evolve the organization.
Because it's not an easy thing to hear that computer security is an oxymoron. People don't want to hear that. People want to just say, "Can I buy something for that? And can we get better biscuits or better cookies at this conference?" It's not something. It's not a profession for everybody. I guess you have to be a little resilient and have a sense of humor to be in cybersecurity. I think because. I don't know.
I like the phrase you used, flexing the muscle to keep the muscle memory. Dave and I talk about this all the time. Think back when you were a kid in elementary school and you would do, tornado drills, right? You would get down under your desk, you go out in the hall and you put your hands up over your head, right? That was to prepare for an emergency. So you had that muscle memory. Should it happen, you know exactly what to do. Or you have fire drills so you don't have kids running into each other up and down the hall and they know where the exits are, they know where to go. But when it comes to cybersecurity, when was the last time you did a tabletop exercise to execute on that plan? And you get this blank look, like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
That's exactly right.
Exactly. And what's the purpose of that? So they don't understand, by doing fire drills every day, you'll get out alive. And, the majority of people will get out that door because you don't find it in smoke because they've walked that hall 100 times.
Well, to me, it's about a RACI document. To me, it's like a living practice of a RACI, right? Like that, who's responsible, who's accountable, who has to be consulted, meaning they have a say in it, who just needs to know what we're doing because they're task is coming up next, right? Who's going to deal with HR, legal? Who's going to deal with law enforcement? Who's going to deal with the media? When does this happen? At what level does it have to hit until then? Instead, what they do is they have this nice policy and they don't practice it until the
they start reading it during a breach
from ransomware. And they're like, well, now it's time to start looking at that document.
Yeah, let's go read it real fast.
Let's go read that thing real fast. Like, why would you not have at least gone through the exercise so you know who does what?
There's to Richard's point, there's why you got to have a sense of humor, right?
Yeah. It's crazy. Like it's just remarkable when you get involved right in the triage moment and they're like, they just can't believe it. Right. They can't believe this happened. You're like, I could tell you exactly why it happened. Right. Well, when this is all over, we'll sit down. We'll explain exactly why this happened. Because we could have seen this a mile. Like, I'm sure it did not take them long to find you guys. Yeah. So tell us about what, as you're in your experience, building a security culture for an organization, best practices. What are some of the ones that bubble up to the top for you?
Well, it's certainly the fundamentals. For me, when we said you could see it in their eyes, there's a certain amount of, yes, there's muscle memory that can be achieved by practice, but at the end of the day, you need to have somebody who understands, hey, if I do this fire drill, I'll get out alive. And so there's a certain amount of incentive that companies need and to instill into staff to understand the incentive behind following silly practices and changing passwords. And so I think one of the, in terms of fundamentals to instill a culture in the company, that's done by leadership. And that's done, whether you have cybersecurity leadership through a CISO or you don't, and you're in a small mom and pop .co.uk or .com type of facility. It has always been said in our industry that it starts at the top because it is, because cybersecurity is not easy to understand at all times. And while you and we might try to simplify it to make it digestible and understandable, my attempt in doing that is that you get it and you think, well, that's not so complex. Okay, I can do that. And you find reason. That's why I think of things like, hey, this is not ones and zeros. It's data about your life. And when you think about it like that, you might be quicker to respond to, hey, that's an incident or an anomaly, or I've never seen that person on this floor before, and he's not wearing a badge or whatever, and make the connection. So I think it's leadership. I've always had a problem with leadership, not just leadership when it comes to cybersecurity, not just by our CISOs, but by our senior management. And we've got onto that very early. In every conference I was in 20 years ago, they all said, "Oh, it starts at the top, and the top builds the," and that is unfortunately true. I've never seen I never saw it start from the grassroots. I never saw a bunch of employees get together and say, "We need to protect our data." You just don't see a strike on the floor saying we need more cybersecurity, or this union's going to strike.
Coming soon to a union near you.
I don't, for me, part of the problem is, like I said, I think we're disassociated with the impact on our lives from the data that we're supposed to be protecting in a cybersecurity umbrella. And when I make that connection, whether I'm doing cybersecurity awareness training, and you see something click in their eyes and say, "Wait a minute, you're right. My grandma just went to Amazon, and now Amazon's pulling her, credit record from their database." And Amazon, when you connect it to real impacts in people's lives, we start to pay attention.
Yeah.
Like that guy who said, "You're either on the internet, you're either my client or you're my enemy." For me, that's what we're not doing. We're not defining the problem. On the internet, there's no oversight. There's no, good guy, bad guy.
It's the Wild West.
It's right. And we assume, just like when we board a train, that there's fire life safety. And if there's a problem, somebody will take care of me. So we log on to the internet and we think, well, somebody's out there going to, and it is. Nobody's going to look after you except you on the internet. So those kind of just connecting the dots is what I don't think we do very well, and what leadership needs to do to move this industry forward.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's fantastic. Before we let you go, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on just the scale of cybercrime lately? Like, it seems to have progressed. I mean, you didn't hear about that many breaches prior to 2011. And between 2011 and 2013, they really productized, ransomware as a service became a thing, malware as a service. You've got all these things. You've got initial access brokers. It's really become organized, extremely well funded, better funded than the mafia. Yeah. And I'm just so, it's just a beast that is just so large. How do we address that when we're still struggling with jobs gaps and hundreds of thousands of security openings and we can't fill them yet? Any thoughts on that?
Can't you ask me something easier?
No, I just, you've got more experience and you're over the pond. I'm still looking for the answers from these interviews. I want to I got great nuggets from you. Like, I'm going to, I can see Mosher in the next meeting. You're either my client or you're my enemy. I can see that coming.
That sounds like something Marlon Brando would have said.
Right.
I can see him using that now.
I'm using that.
No, you're right.
I'm just pointing out the problems here.
There's money to be made. That's why my problem is I'm having a problem with my industry, because I don't think we're rising. There's so much cash. I just read recently that right now there's more money being made by cybersecurity criminals than there was in the 80s by cocaine cartels.
Yes, that is accurate. The FBI
I lived through the 80s, and I lived through the 80s.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, and you can't get your head around that. How much data? I've also read, conservative estimates that we've lost over 18 million personnel records. There's only 7 or 8 billion people on the planet. We've lost twice the number of records that there are human beings walking around on the face of the globe. And I'm thinking, how much more can we lose? But it's sorry to pivot back to this. We don't get data equals cash. Data equals cash. Data equals cash. And if we did that, if we protected the information that we upload into Amazon, like we did with the $12 or $14 in our wallet, if somebody grabbed our wallet and ran away with $14, we'd put our lives on the line.
We'd be chasing them down
because
the block.
That's money to us, And we upload things like it was going out of style. We haven't made that connection. So I think it's a really good point. To say it's only going to get worse. It's not tangible to us. These losses aren't tangible to us. Like in the 80s, the cocaine money wasn't tangible to us. unless you're doing cocaine, I guess, and you were spending that kind of money, you didn't feel the pain yourself. And until you do, it's just going to keep getting bigger. And that's the way, people get religion after a near-death experience. And I go into businesses, and like you said, David, you look in their eyes and you know if they get it. And the reason they got it, they've had a breach.
Yeah.
And they get it. They know the pain now. I don't want to feel this pain again. Let's do this right. What do I have to do? And so when will it stop? How would it get bigger? Ransomware, to me, come on, we didn't see that coming. Ransomware 101, we didn't see that coming.
Yeah, right.
The evolution.
It's so funny because now that's one element of the code, but the whole ransomware approach involves like 5 different types of malware. It had like the people getting tattoos with the gang names on them. Like it's
multiple expressions.
Tattoo.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. But the evolution of threats, that's what makes me feel that we're all just ridiculous. So we see ransomware, they lock up a website, and then so we all jump, we spend a lot of money trying to fix up. Then you lock up a backup, your backup, and you think, we didn't see that coming. We just stupid that we don't anticipate what the next threat. We're always a step behind when we should be a step ahead, or at least in pace, on step with our threat actors, but we're not.
And critical infrastructures, like critical infrastructure, we saw, we were having conversations about that years ago, and now you're starting to see it left and right. And people think of critical infrastructure, well, the government's taking care of that. I'm like, critical infrastructure is like the local water company. Like they have like one IT guy. Like they are not taking care of that.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And
it's
he only
scary.
works 2 days a week. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, this was good stuff.
Yeah. Hey, fantastic. And what you guys are doing at Risk Cruise, top shelf.
Thank you.
Fantastic work. I love the mission. I couldn't agree more with you, but it would be a really boring podcast if I just sat here and just listened to you and just agreed. So I had to try and say, what do we say to people that say this? What are we, trying to have some debate.
No, this was good stuff.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was
Richard,
absolutely fantastic. So it won't be, I'm sure we'll see you at some events or we will meet in person soon. And thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Any parting words? Do you have anything exciting? Are you speaking at any events? Anything coming up that you want to share?
No, nothing to plug, nothing to promote. I'm on the circuit. No, I just wanted to thank you guys for a podcast well done. Keep fighting a good fight and putting out the good podcast.
We certainly will.
First time caller, long time fan. I think
excellent. You are welcome. This will not be the last time we talk to you.
No, not at all.
It'll be a great conversation.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so
Richard.
much.
Cheers.
See ya.
Hey, well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. Our next episode starts right now.
Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. And download the podcast episodes available everywhere you get podcasts.
To support our show and get exclusive pre-release episodes and bonus content, please subscribe to Cybercrime Junkies Prime.
Link in the description and show notes. And thanks for being a cybercrime junkie.